First quarter here in 2025 revolved around a lot of headlines that talked about tariffs, what the US doing, what are foreign countries doing maybe as a response. It is a great time to take a look at your portfolio and say, how am I managing risk and am I really comfortable with it? A down quarter in the market can be a great wake up call that maybe you haven't looked at what you're doing in a while and make sure that it's still the way that it makes sense for you. So for example, a lot of people might be overly concentrated in US large cap, the S&P 500, because it's done so well the last couple of years. It's only natural that a lot of people might let that piece get a little bit larger, or maybe even we're putting more and more into that piece. So the first thing here is remember that one of the ways that you can manage volatility, manage risk in your portfolio is through diversification. Not just using one area, but spreading it out to many different areas that may not be moving in the same way. So when the US market goes down, for example, this first quarter, foreign went up about 6 to 7%, whereas large cap was down 4 to 5%. Secondly, here is, are you rebalancing? Are you using a secondary part of your portfolio? So let's say that you do have US large cap, it's gotten big. Are you hitting that rebalancing button, taking some of these positive gains and moving them into other areas that might be below where they're supposed to be for how you're wanting to allocate your account? Lastly, here, making sure that we have the proper pieces in the portfolio that tend to balance risk the most. So for example, fixed income or bonds, that's a piece of your portfolio. You normally have a stock piece and a bond piece. Bond piece is traditionally there not to give you a higher return, but to protect you more so when the market goes down. Since 2022, when interest rates shot up, bonds got hit. They have been more correlated to stocks. They haven't been providing as much protection. We can see in this first quarter that traditional relationship certainly held true. Lastly, there are other newer ways that you can look to manage risk as well that could potentially make sense, something like a buffered ETF. So here, just as an example, 15% downside protection on the US large cap market. So, different percentages, different time periods, different indexes you could attach to, but that's another way that you can look to potentially manage risk in your portfolio. Finally, for the market going down, how unusual is that? Is something that's different, or is that something that is the kind of the normal par for the course? Since 1950, there have been 57 10% drops or more. So that did happen in that first quarter. So that averages out to about once every 1 to 1.5 years. So not something that I would say is super uncommon. And we haven't had a negative quarter since quarter 3 of 2022. So all of 2023, all the quarters were positive. 2024, all the quarters were positive. So you can certainly argue that we were due for a negative quarter and fits within that 10% kind of timeline for what I went over there. Finally, next 12 months after a 10% drop historically, 80% of the time, it has been positive after that. Not to say that this may or may not be positive. We don't really know for another 12 months, but just to kind of put things in perspective. So great takeaways for here. Don't just focus on the headlines. Take this as an opportunity to look at the risk in your portfolio and make sure you're comfortable with how you're structured.